The stage was a sea of chaos, a whirlwind of laughter and inebriation. 5 men, the biggest stars in Hollywood, were tearing up the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. It was January 1960, and the Rat Pack was in full swing. Frank Sinatra, the leader, was swaying on his feet, his voice rich and smooth as he crooned "Pennies from Heaven." But it wasn't just the music that had the crowd on their feet. It was the sheer energy, the unrestrained fun, and the undeniable chemistry between the 5 of them. Joey Bishop, the jokester with the perpetual frown, stepped up to the microphone. "Any old business," he quipped, his eyes twinkling. The audience roared, knowing this was just the beginning of the night's antics. Sammy Davis Jr., the most versatile of them all, joined in, his dancing skills on full display. Dean Martin, the cool, laid-back crooner, wandered on stage with a drink in hand, interrupting everyone's numbers with his own brand of off-the-cuff humor. Peter Lawford, the charming British actor, completed the quintet, adding his own flair to the mix. But the real shock came when Sammy, dressed in a silly headdress, started dancing around in a caricature of a Native American. Frank grabbed a white tablecloth, draped it over his head, and announced, "All right, folks, the meeting is on Friday afternoon." The crowd laughed, but the laughter was uneasy. This was 1960, and the world was still grappling with deep-seated racism and prejudice. Sammy, a black man and a recent convert to Judaism, played along with the jokes, his laughter a mix of genuine amusement and a need to fit in. The night was a roller coaster of performances, jokes, and spontaneous moments. Frank introduced Dean as the Dago who's taking over the world. Dean, in turn, joked about "me no take single drink all year, just doubles." The stage became a playground where boundaries blurred, and the lines between entertainment and insult became dangerously thin. Sammy's role was especially complex. He was the only black man in the group, and the only one who had faced the brutal realities of racial discrimination firsthand. Yet, he was also one of the most talented and versatile performers, a man who could sing, dance, and tell jokes with the best of them. When Peter wanted to join Sammy in a dance number, Sammy quipped, "If I were you, I wouldn't want to dance with one of the great Jewish Mau Mau dancers of our time." The audience erupted in laughter, but the laughter was laced with a hint of discomfort. The Rat Pack shows were a mix of brilliance and crassness, of groundbreaking entertainment and problematic humor. They were a reflection of their time, a time when the world was changing, but old prejudices still lingered. The stage at the Sands was a microcosm of this era, a place where the greatest entertainers of the day could let their guard down and be themselves, even if it meant crossing lines that today seem unimaginable. The show continued, the stars drinking and carousing, the audience hanging on every word and every note. For 2 hours, the Sands was the center of the universe, a place where the rules of the world outside didn't apply. The Rat Pack was more than just a group of friends. They were a phenomenon, a symbol of a new kind of cool, a new kind of entertainment. And in that moment, under the bright lights of Las Vegas, they were unstoppable. The Rat Pack, a group of charismatic entertainers led by Frank Sinatra, became a symbol of a changing era in American politics and entertainment. In 1960, John F. Kennedy, the young and dynamic senator from Massachusetts, visited Las Vegas during his campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination. He stopped by the Sands Hotel to see the Rat Pack's dinner show on February 7th. Sinatra, a close friend and strong supporter of Kennedy, introduced him to the audience, praising him as the brightest man in the political world. Kennedy stood and took a couple of bows, and the connection between show business and politics was never more evident. This event at the Sands Hotel was a once-in-a-lifetime gathering of the original Rat Pack. They later reunited in Miami for the last few nights of Sinatra's engagement at the Fontainebleau Hotel, and again in Las Vegas on August 3, 1960, for the world premiere of Ocean's 11. The movie, a heist caper, was a box office success and led to a second Rat Pack film, Sergeants 3, which was filmed mostly in Utah in 1961. In Las Vegas, the Rat Pack was the ultimate in group. Their clubhouse was the Sand Steam Room, where they would gather to relax and chat before their evening shows. Each member had a personalized robe. Sinatra was the leader, Martin was Dago, and Davis was Smokey. After their shows, they often hung out in the casino, dealing blackjack cards or watching other shows on the Strip. Their presence created an electric atmosphere in the city, and everyone benefited from their star power. Despite their fame, the Rat Pack members had distinct personalities. Sinatra, the king of Las Vegas, was known for his charisma and high standards. He attracted high rollers to the casinos and was a role model for other entertainers. However, he could also be temperamental and quick to anger. Dean Martin, on the other hand, was laid back and easygoing, a valuable asset to the Sands for drawing in big gamblers. Sammy Davis Jr. was energetic and always surrounded by people, but his partying and relationships sometimes made him controversial. Sinatra's circle of friends included a mix of show business pals and other notable figures. One of his closest friends was insult comic Don Rickles, whom Sinatra discovered at a nightclub in Miami. Rickles' humor, which often included playful jabs at Sinatra and other Rat Pack members, became a hit in Las Vegas. Rickles became a regular in the Sands steam room and a part of the Rat Pack's inner circle. The Rat Pack's success was also tied to their music. They performed the Great American Songbook, a collection of classic pop standards that were popular in nightclubs. Sinatra, in particular, was a fierce critic of rock and roll, which he saw as a threat to the music he loved. He famously denounced rock and roll as the most brutal, ugly, degenerate, vicious form of expression. However, when Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was set to return from the army in 1960, Sinatra invited him to appear on his television special, Frank Sinatra's Welcome Home Party for Elvis Presley. Despite their past differences, Sinatra wanted to show support for Elvis's comeback. The Rat Pack's influence extended beyond entertainment. They were a symbol of a changing America, where show business and politics intersected in new and exciting ways. Their shows, their music, and their personalities captured the spirit of the early 1960s, a time of optimism and change. The special on ABC in early May was a unique meeting of two generations of American music. Frank Sinatra opened the show with a song called "It's Nice to Go Traveling," which had special lyrics for the occasion. Elvis Presley, dressed in his army uniform, joined Sinatra to sing the final line, "But it's so nice to come home." Elvis then stepped back, letting Sinatra take the stage to reminisce about what Elvis had missed during his 2-year military service. Sinatra sang a hit of his own, "Witchcraft," and the show featured a performance of "Porgy and Bess" by Sammy Cahn, who played a big role in the film. There were also impressions and jokes, with Sinatra and Joey Bishop acting as hecklers. Elvis returned near the end, now in a tuxedo, to sing 2 songs from his new album, the ballad "Fame and Fortune" and the more upbeat "Stuck on You." He was a bit nervous at first, but soon relaxed, shaking his head and hips, which made the teenage girls in the audience go wild. Sinatra and Elvis then performed a duet, with Sinatra singing a swinging version of "Love Me Tender" and Elvis taking on "Witchcraft." They harmonized on the last part of "Love Me Tender." Sinatra seemed more at ease, but both artists shone, and the show was a huge success, drawing 67% of the viewing audience. After the show, Sinatra and Elvis didn't have much contact, but Elvis had strong ties with other members of the Rat Pack. He and Sammy Cahn were friends before Elvis went into the army, and they were even considered for roles in the film The Defiant Ones. Elvis also admired Dean Martin, calling him the king of cool. They shared a love of Vegas, and after the army, Elvis often visited the city with his friends, partying late into the night. However, Elvis came back from the army a different performer. He stopped doing live shows and focused on making movies, which weren't as good as his earlier work. His music also became less exciting, and he produced mostly forgettable songs. Other rock and roll pioneers faced similar challenges. Chuck Berry went to prison, Little Richard turned to religion, and Buddy Holly died in a plane crash. The music scene was now dominated by clean-cut teen idols who looked up to the Rat Pack. The Rat Pack's dynamics changed over time. Peter Lawford, who was close to the Kennedy family, became less involved after JFK election and the subsequent investigation into organized crime. Sinatra, who had hosted JFK at his house, was devastated when the president canceled a planned visit. Sinatra lashed out, blaming Lawford and cutting ties with him. Joey Bishop also had a falling out with Sinatra and was dropped from a Rat Pack movie. Despite these changes, Sinatra, Martin, and Davis continued to perform together. They did a week-long engagement at the Villa Venice in Chicago, and returned to the Sands in Las Vegas. The shows were recorded, and the album Rat Pack Live at the Sands captured their mature act. Martin did his drunk routine, Sinatra sang classics, and Sammy Davis Jr. showed off his musical talents. The highlight was Sinatra and Martin duetting on songs from Guys and Dolls. During this time, Sinatra faced legal troubles. He was under investigation for his involvement with the Cal Neva Lodge, a resort in Lake Tahoe. Sam Giancana, a mob figure, visited the resort, which wasn't allowed. Sinatra tried to defend himself, but eventually sold his stake in the hotel. This was a public humiliation for Sinatra, who had always been a powerful figure in Las Vegas. The incident had an unexpected twist. When Sammy Davis Jr. ran into the investigator, Ed Olson, he surprisingly said, "That little son of a bitch. He's needed this for years. I've been working with him for 16 years, and nobody's ever had the guts to stand up to him." This showed a different side of Sammy and the complex relationships within the Rat Pack. The Rat Pack, the group of entertainers that included Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr., faced a series of dramatic events that marked a turning point in their careers and in the history of Las Vegas. One November morning in 1963, while they were filming a movie on the Warner Bros. Lot, the news of President Kennedy's assassination stunned them. Work stopped for a while, but they eventually resumed filming. Sinatra, deeply affected by the loss of his friend and the end of the Camelot era, retreated to Palm Springs, spending the weekend watching TV coverage of the tragic event. Just a couple of weeks later, Sinatra's son, Frank Jr., was kidnapped in Lake Tahoe. The kidnappers demanded a ransom of $240,000, which Sinatra paid. Thankfully, Frank Jr. was released unharmed, and the kidnappers were caught. Despite the positive outcome, rumors spread that the kidnapping was a publicity stunt to boost Frank Jr.'s career. These rumors, although false, reflected the public's growing skepticism about Sinatra. By 1964, the Rat Pack's influence was waning. The Beatles had arrived, bringing a new wave of music and culture that made the Rat Pack seem old-fashioned. However, the members continued to perform together occasionally. In 1965, Sinatra, Martin, and Davis Jr. did a benefit performance at the Kiel Opera House in St. Louis. The following year, they had one last show at the Sands, where they were billed as Dean Martin and his friends. Individually, the Rat Pack members found success. Dean Martin's song, "Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime," became a hit, and he started a long-running variety show on NBC. Sammy Davis Jr. took a break from Vegas to star in a Broadway musical called Golden Boy, but returned to the Sands in 1966 with a dynamic show. Sinatra, after a tough year, made a career comeback with reflective songs like "It Was a Very Good Year" and a live album, Sinatra at the Sands, which featured the Count Basie Orchestra. However, the era of the Rat Pack was coming to an end. Sinatra's relationship with the Sands Hotel soured, and he had a public blow-up that ended his long association with the place. This marked the end of the Rat Pack's reign in Vegas. Meanwhile, Las Vegas was changing. In 1960, the city took steps to end racial segregation, allowing African American performers and guests to enter hotels and casinos through the front door. This was a significant step forward, even though full equality would take more time to achieve. The early 1960s saw intense competition among the major hotels on the Strip to book the best talent. The Sands, Sahara, Desert Inn, Riviera, and Flamingo were the top contenders. Each hotel had its signature acts, from comedians to singers to variety shows. Despite the competition, top stars like Sinatra, Martin, and Davis Jr. often commanded high salaries and enjoyed luxurious perks. For many entertainers, playing in Vegas was a dream gig. It offered high visibility, good pay, and a chance to settle down for a while. Bob Newhart, a popular comedian, noted that playing Vegas was a badge of honor, a sign that you had made it in the entertainment world. As the 1960s progressed, Las Vegas continued to evolve, paving the way for a new era of entertainment and cultural change. But the legacy of the Rat Pack and the classic Vegas shows remained a cherished part of the city's history. Vegas was a place where performers could craft their art, night after night, in front of live audiences. Paul Anka described it as a place where you discovered who you were as an entertainer, learning to feel comfortable on stage and work the crowd. For singers, Vegas offered top-notch facilities, great acoustics, and first-class musicians. Each hotel had a house orchestra, often with 16 to 18 pieces, and performers could request anything to ensure their shows were perfect. Tony Bennett, who might have headlined more Vegas shows than anyone, started his Vegas career in the early 1950s at El Rancho Vegas. He played at the Dunes, the Sahara, the Sands, the Riviera, and eventually Caesar's Palace, which gave him a lifetime contract in 1969. Bennett's signature hit, I Left My Heart in San Francisco, became a staple in Vegas, covered by many other singers. He was one of the few who maintained his jazz credibility, while also hitting the pop charts. Vic Damone, another prominent Vegas performer, openly admired Frank Sinatra. He grew up in Brooklyn trying to mimic Sinatra, and even filled in for him once on a radio show. Damone later became part of Sinatra's inner circle at the Sands. He had smooth pipes and good taste in music, working with future stars like Burt Bacharach and John Williams. Despite his talent, rock and roll posed a challenge to his career. He turned down a role in The Godfather and faced financial troubles, but a long-term contract at the Frontier Hotel, paying $30,000 a week, helped him stay afloat. The lounges in Vegas became increasingly important in the 1960s. They were less formal than the showrooms and kept the crowds moving in and out of the casinos. Acts like the Mary Kay Trio and Louis Prima and Keely Smith made lounges popular, and hotels started booking top jazz artists like Sarah Vaughan and Billy Eckstine. The lounges became so significant that some hotels expanded them and gave them new names. The Flamingos Lounge became the Driftwood Room, and the Tropicana's Lounge, managed by Maynard Sloat, was renamed the Blue Room and hosted jazz legends like Louis Armstrong and Benny Goodman. Sonny King, a former boxer from Brooklyn, became a Vegas lounge staple. He spent 13 years at the Sands, where he was often heckled by Sinatra and the Rat Pack. King was known for his sentimental songs and could captivate a room with his emotional performances. Buddy Grieco, another lounge star, had a smooth jazzy style and a hit with The Lady is a Tramp. His image inspired characters in movies and TV shows, like Jerry Lewis's Buddy Love in The Nutty Professor. Judy Garland, despite her personal struggles, was a Vegas regular. Her performances were often emotionally charged, and she sometimes brought her offstage drama to the stage. In 1957, she walked out of a flamenco show because of a rowdy crowd. At the Sahara in 1962, she was so nervous that the hotel's entertainment director had to hypnotize her before each show. Her last Vegas engagement at Caesar's Palace in 1967 was particularly tumultuous, but she still commanded the stage with her powerful presence. Eddie Fisher, known for his romantic hits and tumultuous love life, was another Vegas star. He married Debbie Reynolds and later Elizabeth Taylor, and these relationships often overshadowed his performances. In 1957, Debbie surprised him on stage at the Tropicana, but their marriage was already rocky. After their split, he serenaded Elizabeth Taylor at the Tropicana, and they got married the last day of his show. Despite his personal issues, Fisher remained a top earner in Vegas, but by the late 1960s, his career was on the decline. Barbra Streisand, and a rising star from New York, initially struggled in Vegas. When she opened for Liberace at the Riviera in 1963, her style didn't resonate with the Vegas crowd. Liberace, however, helped her by warming up the audience and introducing her as his discovery. Streisand's performance improved, and the Riviera offered her a contract. She returned to Vegas in 1969 as the opening headliner at the International Hotel, followed by Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley, despite his success in movies, found refuge in Vegas. After his return from the Army, his films became formulaic, and he felt unfulfilled. Vegas was a place where he could escape and indulge in his fantasies. He would stay at the Sahara for weeks, enjoying the shows and the all-night activity. In 1962, he brought his girlfriend, Priscilla Beaulieu, to Vegas and showed her the town, introducing her to the vibrant nightlife and even some drugs. Elvis's love for Vegas was clear, and it eventually became the place where he would make a remarkable comeback. Elvis Presley returned to Las Vegas in July 1963, but this time things were different. He wasn't there to play and party, he was there to work. His 15th movie, Viva Las Vegas, was set to shoot, and it was a big deal. The film had a bigger budget than any of his previous movies, and it was directed by George Sidney, a well-known Hollywood director. Sidney had directed classics like Anchor's Oig and Showboat, so there was a lot of hope for this project. Elvis's co-star was Anne Margaret, a rising star who had just made a big splash in Bye Bye Birdie. She was beautiful, talented, and full of energy. The two of them had a great chemistry on and off the screen. They flirted a lot during breaks, and even went for motorcycle rides together. Their connection was so strong that it became a real romance. However, there was one big problem. Priscilla, Elvis's girlfriend back in Memphis, was waiting for him to come home and marry her. When she heard about Elvis and Anne Margaret, she was naturally upset. Elvis tried to brush it off, telling Priscilla that Anne Margaret was just hanging out with the guys. But Priscilla wasn't buying it and kept pressing for a visit, which Elvis kept putting off. The filming of Viva Las Vegas wasn't all smooth sailing. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, was worried about the budget and the amount of screen time Anne Margaret was getting. He wanted Elvis to be the center of attention, so he made sure to cut one of their duets and turn another into a solo for Elvis. Despite these issues, the film still had its moments. The song The Lady Loves Me was a sweet duet, and the big production numbers like Come On, Everybody, and Elvis's cover of What I Say were energetic and fun. But the movie itself wasn't exactly a masterpiece. The story was silly, and Elvis's acting was still a bit stiff. Anne Margaret, with her dynamic performances, really stood out. Still, Viva Las Vegas became a classic, mostly because of its catchy title song and the way it captured the spirit of Las Vegas in its golden age. After Viva Las Vegas wrapped up in September 1963, it took a while to hit the theaters. When it finally did, in May 1964, it did pretty well at the box office, but the world of music was changing. In February 1964, the Beatles arrived in New York and took America by storm. Their appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show was a historic moment, and their music dominated the charts. By August, they were back in the U.S. for their first tour, and Las Vegas was their second stop. The Beatles arrived at the Sahara Hotel in the early morning of August 20th. Fans surrounded the hotel, and the Beatles had to sneak in through the freight elevator. They performed 2 shows at the Las Vegas Convention Center, and the crowd was wild. The Beatles played a mix of their hits and even added a Broadway ballad, Till There Was You, just for the Vegas audience. The next day, the Las Vegas Review-Journal ran a headline that read, Las Vegas survives Beatles barely. Despite the Beatles' impact, Las Vegas kept booming. The city's showrooms were still packed with stars, and the hotels started to invest in big production shows. The Lido de Paris and Foley's Berger were already hits, and in 1963, the Dunes introduced the Casino de Paris, a new French-inspired show with chic costumes and a real French star, Lion Renaud. These shows were a big deal because they could run for a long time, which made them cost-effective for the hotels. They offered glamour, spectacle, and a variety of acts, from magicians to acrobats. One of the key figures behind these shows was Don Arden, a choreographer and director who was known for his innovative and over-the-top productions. Arden created opening numbers for the Desert Inn, staged new editions of the Lido de Paris, and even recreated historical events like the San Francisco earthquake and the sinking of the Titanic. His shows were full of special effects, from rainstorms to train crashes, and they were designed to wow the audience. Arden was a perfectionist and could be tough on his dancers, but his shows were legendary. One of his most acclaimed productions was Pizzazz 68, which celebrated Hollywood's past with tributes to stars like Mae West, Carmen Miranda, and Julie Andrews. The show was a hit, and critics raved about its glamour and creativity. Another influential choreographer was Ron Lewis, who brought a unique style to Vegas dance. His choreography was vibrant and jazzy, with precise movements and a lot of energy. Lewis worked on shows like Vive Les Girls, at the Dunes and the Casino de Paris, and he was known for being a demanding but brilliant teacher. Dancers who worked with him considered it a privilege, even though he was known for his tough methods. These production shows were a big part of what made Las Vegas so exciting in the 1960s. They were a mix of glamour, talent, and spectacle, and they helped define the city's entertainment scene. Even as the world of music changed, Las Vegas continued to shine, thanks to the creativity and vision of people like Don Arden and Ron Lewis. Vegas was not just about the big stars, the lavish shows, and the glitzy dancers. It was also about the comedians who brought the city its special sizzle. Many of these comedians were veterans from Hollywood, Broadway, and television, and they added a unique flavor to the Las Vegas scene. One of the most influential choreographers in Vegas was Jerry Jackson, a former lounge dancer who started choreographing for shows like Vive Les Girls and Foley's Berger. He took over as the director of the Foleys in 1975. Jackson understood what made Vegas special, and often said that people from New York or Los Angeles thought they were better, but they didn't understand the city's unique energy. "You can't just throw people doing generic dance steps on stage," he would say. "It's about precision, style, and splash." Dancers in Vegas were equally proud of their work. Sal Angelica, who danced for years with Juliette Prowse, moved to Vegas from New York in 1965 for what was supposed to be a 6-month gig. He ended up staying forever. "From the day I got here, I never stopped working," he said. Broadway is actually less stressful than Vegas. On Broadway, the dancing isn't the star. Here, dancing was the star. Comedy was another crucial element of Vegas entertainment. Comedians like Jack Benny, Milton Berle, and George Burns were regulars, headlining variety shows where they introduced new talent. Jerry Lewis, after splitting with Dean Martin, became a solo headliner at the Sands Hotel. His act included slapstick, songs, and audience participation, but it was his sometimes overbearing ego that made him a unique presence. Television also played a significant role in creating Vegas stars. Carol Burnett, fresh from winning an Emmy for her work on CBS, set an advance sale record at the Sands in 1962. But the most surprising success story was Johnny Carson. As the host of The Tonight Show, Carson had no nightclub experience, but his 4-week run at the Sahara Hotel in 1964 broke attendance records. Carson's act expanded on his TV monologues and sketches, and he could be a bit naughtier on the Vegas stage, which only added to his appeal. The stand-up comics of the 1960s were a raucous bunch. Joe E. Lewis, a regular at El Rancho Vegas, was known for his slow, self-deprecating humor. But the comedians who followed him were faster, louder, and more in your face. They honed their skills in New York nightclubs and the Borscht Belt resorts, and they brought that energy to Vegas. Jack Carter, with his aggressive and neurotic style, was a standout. He would insult the audience, sing, and do impressions, all while delivering a rapid-fire series of jokes. Insult comedy was a big part of the Vegas scene. Don Rickles, a native of Queens, became famous for his barbs. He would pummel the audience with jokes about their appearance, race, and ethnicity. "I know your Italian nothing matches," he'd say to a man in the front row. "You gotta be a Jew, lady. You're the only one with a stole on." Despite the crude humor, Rickles always managed to maintain a sense of fun and inclusivity. Buddy Hackett, another New Yorker, was known for his impish personality and his willingness to push boundaries. His act became increasingly blue, and by the late 1960s, his shows were advertised as adults only. Hackett's ability to apologize for his rough material with a humble mea culpa, like a little boy, won him over the audience. He was so successful that he became a vice president of entertainment at the Sahara and had a house on the golf course. Shecky Greene, unlike Rickles and Hackett, was almost entirely a Las Vegas creation. He lived and worked in Vegas, and his wild, improvisational style changed every night. His performances were never recorded, making his talent the most difficult to capture. But for many, Shecky Greene represented the pinnacle of Las Vegas comedy. Vegas was a place where talent, energy, and a bit of irreverence came together to create something truly special. The city's comedians and dancers were not just entertainers. They were the heart and soul of the Las Vegas experience. Shecky Greene was a man of many talents and many stories. Born Fred Sheldon Greenfield in 1926 in Chicago, he learned to mimic accents from his older brother and soon found himself performing in clubs across the Midwest. His big break came at the Preview Lounge in New Orleans, where he spent 6 years until the club burned down. From there, his journey took him to Reno, where he met his first wife, a blackjack dealer who he claimed turned him into an alcoholic. His career really took off in Las Vegas, where he first appeared at the Last Frontier in 1953. Green was a force of nature on stage. He mixed jokes, songs, parodies, and impressions, often improvising and creating a unique experience for each audience. He could break into an opera or a comedy routine, and his shows were wild and unpredictable. People compared him to other famous comedians, but Green insisted he was one of a kind. He once said, "I never worked like Rickles. I do dialects, I do singing, I do all kinds of things. Rickles never had one fucking iota of my talent." Offstage, however, Green struggled with his demons. He battled manic depression and alcoholism, which often led to wild behavior. He went on binges, got into fights, and clashed with his bosses. One time, he even punched Milton Berle in the jaw during a fight at the Riviera Casino. Despite his erratic behavior, his talent was undeniable, and he became a star in Vegas. But Vegas was a double-edged sword for many entertainers. The city's allure of gambling and the constant presence of the mob made it a challenging place to live. Many stars, like Green, lost large sums of money and faced personal struggles. The mob, while powerful and intimidating, was also a part of the fabric of the city. Some entertainers, like Vic Damon, formed close relationships with mob figures, while others, like Shecky Green, tried to keep their distance. Vegas was also a boomtown for musicians and dancers. The city provided steady work and good pay, attracting some of the best talent in the country. Big band musicians, who had lost their jobs after World War II, found a home in Vegas. Each major hotel had its own orchestra, and the work was so plentiful that some musicians did double shifts. For many, Vegas was a place to settle down and build a career. For female performers, Vegas offered a different kind of opportunity. Showgirls and dancers filled the chorus lines and production shows, showcasing their beauty and talent. Some came from Broadway, others from burlesque, and many were just starting out. They were the faces of Vegas, adding glamour and excitement to the shows. Despite the challenges, Shecky Green and many others found success in Vegas. But the city's dark side, gambling, the mob, and personal struggles left its mark. Years later, Green reflected on his time in Vegas with mixed feelings. "Vegas was very, very good for me, but Vegas was very, very bad for me," he said. "I hated what it did to me. I hated what I saw happen to other people. In the end, Vegas was a place where dreams could come true, but where the price of success was often high." For Shecky Green and many others, it was a city of contradictions, a place where they could be both the biggest stars and the most vulnerable.